to our women. Hi there and welcome to our Women's Virtual Chats. I'm Michelle McLean, your host. I'm a success coach and a former Miss Universe. And every week we speak with inspirational people and experts in their field who come to share with us some inspirational stuff that impact us as women in the 21st century. Today we have Justin Jacobs with us, who is a financial advisor from Stanley, and he's going to be sharing with us some interesting tips and very important tips for retirement, as well as to be savvy in our financial planning. Justin, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me. I'm really looking forward to this chat.
Wonderful. Well, we have a common background, not that we're common or anything like that, but we share a common background coming from Southern Africa. You've also traveled the world extensively. You've lived in many different countries, and now you've settled here in the United States with your family. Maybe we can just start off by finding out what brought you here to America.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, I grew up in South Africa. One of my dreams was always to live in the US. So I initially got a transfer to New York many moons ago, working in the finance industry. Then I moved to London because I got a good job opportunity within London. Again, working within the banks, specializing in investment banking. But my dream was always to come back to the US. So I met my wife when I was actually living in New York. And although she's South African as well, her parents live in the US. So we decided, once our son was born, we decided we wanted to make the move to the US to be closer to some family and also fulfill that last step in what we wanted to do.
We have had quite a few conversations, having, being in the same South African club together and being sort of immigrants coming to the country. Do you find immigration, people who come here to America find it harder to adapt to the money system here and financial astuteness as opposed to where they might live in the rest of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when moving to a new country, it's incredibly difficult to get yourself established. One of the big things in the US is obviously establishing yourself and getting a credit score, and things like that are incredibly challenging. And especially when you first arrive here and you don't have any history, people don't realize how difficult it is to even do the simple things. For example, get a cell phone contract or open a bank account. When you've got no history, it's actually incredibly difficult to get these things done. So,
yes, I remember a friend of mine's daughter was in university and certainly was able to go to the bank and get credit before I was even able to.
Yeah.
That's crazy system.
Yeah, so it is. It's incredibly difficult, especially when you first arrive. It literally takes months before you can get any of these things done. And that's not specific to the US. I remember when I first moved to London, I couldn't get a cell phone before I got a job. And then I couldn't get a job. My job wanted me to open a bank account before they would actually hire me. But I couldn't get a bank account without a job. So the whole thing, you end up working around in circles before you can actually start off and get established.
So you're saying it's not just exclusive to America that we have these kind of financial obstacles, and has it got worse, obviously, since 9/11, and will it get worse after COVID, the pandemic?
Yeah, it has. I think it's become a lot more difficult. Obviously, with the increased regulations, everyone's concerned about money laundering, and it does. Whenever you come from abroad, it creates those challenges. Will it get any easier? I'm not sure it will get any easier because there's still all those concerns. And now I know what some people are doing. Instead of opening an account in the US, they'll open it in an offshore region, which sort of creates a stepping stone before coming into the US.
So that's obviously something the American government doesn't want to hear. They don't want to see money go out of the country. But,
No, exactly.
but that's for another conversation, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Maybe you can give us a little bit of an overview of certainly living in America and seeing the rest of my family and friends around the world. America has created quite a lovely safety net in terms of unemployment payouts, loans, forgivable loans, which many other countries have not offered to its citizens. What would you say to an American living here today, about the American system since the pandemic hit us?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the system here. I know it gets a lot of criticism, but it actually works incredibly well when you compare it to some other places, especially some of the third world countries like South Africa. I was speaking to a family member yesterday, and it looks like they're going to go into another lockdown. And there are these people who really, they can't afford food. At the moment, it's winter in South Africa. They're getting the power cuts as well. So people are literally cold at night, don't have any electricity, and also struggling to pay the bills and even get food. There's no support network like there is in the US. The hospital systems aren't as good. So they're really suffering on a medical front, on a benefits base. The system is just not as well equipped as it is in the US. So although the US, there is a lot of criticism of the way things have been handled, comparatively to other places, they've actually done really well.
Well, that's good to hear, a positive note about, yes, the government cannot sort all the issues out, and certainly the first and foremost is the safety and health of the citizens. But in a situation like this, in a normal environment, I would be asking you as a financial advisor questions about how do you plan for your retirement? Now, has COVID, the pandemic, affected people's retirement plans in any way? And in a normal environment, how does one plan for your retirement?
Yeah, absolutely. When COVID hit, it created a very big dent in people's retirement plans and 401ks. And it made people very nervous. Now, what that did is, I'm sure you've seen there's a lot of social media going around, people saying your 401k isn't the best place to save for retirement, and there's a lot of these articles going around. Now, unfortunately, as COVID hit, we saw the market drop immensely, and that's what scared a lot of people. But what people don't realize is that these dips in the market do happen every few years. We saw it in 2008 with the financial crisis. We saw it in 2001 with the tech bubble. These things do happen. But the market, and history has proven, the market generally recovers fairly quickly. Not usually as quickly as it did with COVID. COVID, if you think back from March to now, the incredible swing we've had in the market is unbelievable. And so a lot of people's retirement balances are now looking a lot healthier again. But then that raises more questions in their mind. Well, are we in for another crash? And what can I do to protect myself? Now, that all comes into various factors. And obviously, the closer you are to retirement, the more concerned you're going to be. If you've still got time on your side, history has proven that the market will give you a good return. So people who try to time the market and they try to sell out and buy back in, there's a lot of studies done that those people generally end off worse off. You're better off leaving your money in and waiting for the market to stabilize and return.
And just for the layman's terms, when you say leave your money in, where are we leaving our money at this point?
Invested in the market.
Okay.
So
okay.
What some people try to do is they try to time the market. They'll say, let me sell all my investments, hold my money in cash, and then I'll buy into the market at some later point.
Okay.
but more often than not, that's the wrong thing to do. And we saw that in previous crashes as well, that when that does happen, people lock in their losses, and that's when you see a real issue and problem with their retirement balances.
So your advice would be you just leave everything as it is. Do not do anything rash.
Yes, don't do anything rash. And as I say, your retirement accounts are a long-term plan. If you are of the age where you're approaching retirement, you were hopefully more conservative with your investments pre-COVID. So even with COVID, your retirement balances shouldn't have been as impacted as let's say, a 40-year-old who was invested in his retirement account, because he would have been that much more aggressive. So it all depends also on your stage of life.
So that just brings me to another thing here. Investing in the stock market can feel intimidating. But, you know, if you've got stocks, is it not a good time to take out cash now?
I wouldn't say now's necessarily a good time, because what we've seen in the market, and this is one of the things our analysts had been predicting since last year, they were predicting a recession in 2020 or 2021. They didn't know when it was going to occur, because we obviously don't have a crystal ball, but they were predicting a recession in 2020, 2021 based on the fundamentals. We didn't know what was going to drive it. In hindsight, we know that COVID drove us to the recession, but now we are already through the other side. So what that means is, as of last year, we were still in one of the longest bull sessions in history, because it lasted essentially from 2009 to 2019. Now,
what is that term? Sorry, Justin, what is that term?
The bull market. So when we see that optimism in the market, and the market almost carries on growing and growing and growing, but that can't continue forever. But now that we've gone through the recession and we've come out the other side, we believe that we're now entering the next bull cycle, which is going to last a few years. That doesn't mean there's not going to be volatility in between now and then, because obviously we're still not through the pandemic. We haven't gotten through the elections. So there is still going to be volatility between now and then. But in general, we're starting to move into that next bull cycle, which will probably last a few years as well.
There's a lot of questions being asked about where do you save, pre-tax or post-tax? I certainly wouldn't know, being new in the United States.
Yeah, so this often raises a lot of questions, because you have the ability to save pre-tax or post-tax. My answer to people is generally it's a good idea to do both. And I'll give you an example of why. So if you contribute to your retirement savings using pre-tax dollars, what ends up happening is you save the tax now, but then you pay the tax later on in life. So as a practical example, let's say someone's earning $100,000 a year and they contribute 10% to their retirement funds. At the end of the year, they're going to report their income as $90,000. So they haven't paid tax on it. But then when they retire and they start spending that money, that's when they start paying the tax on it. But the idea being it's going to be at a lower tax rate, because you no longer have an income and you don't have to draw, and your expenses are lower because your mortgage is paid off, your kids are out the house. So you're not drawing as much income out of those funds. So you'll be paying tax at a lower rate.
Now, is that, sorry, Justin, for being so naive about all of this, but is that within your Social Security?
No. So that is mainly within your typical retirement accounts, like your 401k or your IRA, which is an individual retirement account. that's normally where you make these pre-tax or post-tax contributions.
Okay. Okay.
Now, with the post-tax, why that's good is because although you may be in a lower tax bracket when you retire, we don't know what the tax brackets are going to be like. The government could have pushed up the tax brackets. So once you've contributed post-tax, it grows tax-free forever. Even when you spend that money, it's tax-free.
So when you advise women, especially in today's world, we have a lot of female viewers here on livingbetter50.com and women's events and expos. The idea is that we should be, no matter whether we're married or not, we should be financially savvy and really aware of our financial future. And many women still maybe feel, you know, socially that they should combine everything with their husband, or so really my question is, do you feel a woman should always stay independently financially independent?
I don't necessarily say financially independent. Where we see the biggest problems is sometimes women rely on the man and think it's the man's department to look after the finances. And we've seen it in the past, and we've seen it with people who weren't our clients and came to us after something had happened to their husband or they got divorced, and they were really in a position where they didn't even know where to begin, because their husband managed the finances, the husband managed the retirement accounts, the husband had a relationship with a financial advisor, which they had never met, which obviously creates a lot of anxiety and problems as well. I'll give you one.
And that with the whole trauma of whatever you're going through, divorce, or whether it might be death or disability.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll give you one example. This woman came to us after her husband passed away, and her and her husband had lived in a golf club community their whole married life, and they did fairly well for themselves. What she found out after her husband had passed away, when he got sick, he had mortgaged the house, and he rang up a lot of debt, obviously not intentionally, but she had no idea about it. So from being a woman who lived the high life, she now turned into a woman who needs to conservatively spend. She had to downsize, and she had no idea of any of this before her husband passed away. So that's why one of the things we recommend, even if the husband does control the finances, that's fine. We recommend our clients at least once a year, we meet with both the husband and the wife, so we can get them on the same page. And we also recommend to the spouse to create one folder that you can keep in the safe or a lockbox or whatever with all the documents, whether it's your life insurance, your retirement account balances, and just update it once a year. So should something happen to either one of you, it's easily available and readily there. Or if, God forbid, something happened to both of you, it's also easy for your children. Your children know where all the information is. So we highly recommend doing that, because we've seen a lot of issues with that in the past. So
having said that, is there a real threat to outliving your assets? Especially as an immigrant moving to a different country, you know, you sell off your properties, you bring in your cash, you move, and then, you know, you try and reinvest, start your life again. But even as a citizen of the United States, do you feel that there is a real threat that we do outlive the assets?
Yeah, absolutely. This has become more and more of an issue over time. And I think it's going to continue to become more and more of an issue over time. And I'll tell you why. So what happens is, now we've had great breakthroughs in medical technology. People are eating healthier. With that comes people living longer. So now people's retirement be almost as long as their working career. People can be in retirement for around 40 years. So being in retirement for that much longer creates an additional pressure on your retirement funds and how long they need to last. Add into that, we all know the healthcare costs continue to increase. So the older you get, the more likely that you're going to need some sort of long-term care at some point in time. And then added to that, and this is why it's especially important for women, studies have shown that women generally outlive their spouses. So it becomes increasingly important for women because they more than likely, according to studies, are going to be the ones living longer and are going to need that money for that much longer. Now, as an immigrant, it obviously creates additional pressure because obviously coming from where we came from and the currency is a lot weaker, you're bringing in less money with you than you may have had where you started off. And also because you haven't worked here your entire life, your social security, what you're going to get from social security is more likely going to be less as well. So it creates additional challenges to your situation. And then added to that as well, like the younger you are, generally the cheaper it can be to get sort of long-term care insurance and things like that. But as you come here later in life, it's more expensive to get these things because you're that much older. You may or may not have had a health history, things like that.
Well, those are certainly things to really look into and take care of, especially as us women who might have had, traditional kind of lifestyles. As you've said, Justin, it's so important that we become a little bit more aware of, our financial situation, and certainly you've given us some great tips here today. Justin Jacobs, financial advisor for Morgan Stanley. It really is fantastic to hear your advice. Thank you for joining us. How are people able to reach out to you if they'd like some more advice from you?
Absolutely. So if they do Google me, you can just Google Justin Jacobs, Morgan Stanley. I'll come up first on there. Or feel free, my email address is fairly straightforward. It's just justin.jacobs@morganstanley.com. Or lastly, feel free to give me a call. My number is 561-393-1801.
Wonderful, Justin. Well, thank you for joining us here today, and to all our lovely ladies and gentlemen who watch our women's virtual chats. Thank you for joining us once again, and we look forward to seeing you next Wednesday, same time, 4:30 to 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm Michelle McLean, your host, success coach and former Miss Universe. I look forward to seeing you soon again. Be safe,